For our second panel, we will explore the important topic of protecting youth from the dangers of drugs. The fight against drugs is not only a public health challenge, but also a moral and educational struggle. In this panel, scholars and practitioners will explore how faith, family, and community values can inform and support effective drug policy. The discussion will emphasize how educating youth through moral responsibility fosters prevention, resilience, and accountability within individuals and their communities. In our panel today, unfortunately, János Setényi can't be here due to illness, but please welcome Stephen Balogh, Chair of the Social Democratic Party of the UK and Visiting Fellow at MCC. Luke Niforatos, Executive Vice President of Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Juraj Šúst, Chairman of Ladislav Hanus Fellowship, Editor-in-Chief of Verbum. And Szabolcs Nagypál, Head of the Center for Law and Society at MCC.
Thank you, dear friends. I also welcome our distinguished guests. So our topic, as you see, is armoring our youth, faith education, and community responsibility. There's a Slido code, which you can see. We encourage you to send your questions via Slido, and they will be posed to the lecturers. We start our panel by 3 times 5 minutes presentations on this topic, and I ask Mr. Balogh to start it.
Thank you very much. Is the microphone working? Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, my congratulations, first of all, to the MCC for organizing this really important event on a crucial subject. This is the mid-afternoon dip, so what better to have a politician talking to you at halfway through the afternoon to wake you up, so please bear with me. Going back, in 1885 in Rome, an international congress on criminal anthropology ignited a debate about criminal tendencies, human agency, and the influence of society. It correctly downplayed the big debate at the time about genetic predisposition towards crime in favor of social and environmental factors alongside personal agency and responsibility. A pioneer in the field, Alexandre Lacassagne, coined a famous phrase sometime afterwards: La société a les criminels qu'elle mérite. It's often translated into English as society has the criminals it deserves. That discussion obviously continues to this day, often focused on justice reform and the addressing of socioeconomic inequalities. For this MCC Summit's theme of the endemic drugs problem, we have, simplistically speaking, demand and supply aspects. It was fascinating, actually, the last session talking about demand. Whilst obviously symbiotic in this session, we're mainly considering the demand side. I should say the last session was supply side. I'm going to draw on my UK party's political outlook and my personal convictions. I'm not a practitioner in the field, so I'm looking for examples of great practice that I can take back to London. So, to adapt Lacassagne, does society have the drug users it deserves? If society shapes its users, how do we reforge communities to armor our youth against this tide? Unsurprisingly, my ultimate diagnosis is of inevitable failure of liberalism taken to its logical conclusion of atomized individuals as economic production and consumption-based units underpinned by a utilitarian calculus stripped of relational dimension, plus a postmodern attempt to destroy meaning and narrative, to render any sort of inspirational story almost impossible. So you only have left a functional and technical or technocratic explanation, and even more depressing, a rules-based agenda for relations that is inevitably normative to liberal sentiment. So every part of our lives becomes governed by rules, in other words. So while secular in constitution, my party confidently and deeply draws inspiration from religion-infused texts, such as Catholic social teaching, alongside philosophical arguments emphasizing community formation in time and space, such as those of the late Roger Scruton. Like many Western countries, religious expression is relegated to the private sphere, there's been a really big push in Britain to force religious voices out of the public discussion space, and progressive sentiment often puts faith-based initiatives under pressure to compromise, and sometimes that's backed up by government legal restrictions on the ability of faith-based initiatives actually to operate authentically. Whilst I note more small c conservative politicians making personal faith declarations, thinking J.D. Vance, and citing the sources of their inspiration, I amongst them as a Catholic Christian, as an anti-sectarian party pushing against the rapid growth of sectarian politics in my country, we have to tread a middle ground, and a whole society solidarity ethos comes first. But obviously in conjunction with faith-based movements on the ground. Obviously, that's a matter of great debate how that happens. So in that context, I want to make 3 main points quickly. I will do them obviously as a politician and thinking about policy, but I hope, and apply to my own country, but hopefully more general application. Firstly, public policy must recognize that community fabric and stable families are these days a middle-class luxury. Where families are strong and where communities are strong, it's where there is wealth. Working class youth has fewer societal checks and balances against the temptation of drugs, made worse with economic precariousness, and some studies show youth overdose 50% higher in deprived areas. So we must confidently reclaim these as public goods and ensure they are fairly distributed. Family and community hubs extended to include a platform for strong and clear local leadership and role models as well as practical service. Secondly, we need to re-examine critically the trend towards liberalization of supposedly softer drugs and so-called harm reduction programs, which in the most part are anything but. That's been well talked about for the rest of this day so far, so I won't talk about it too much. But where there is some liberalization, that just inevitably brings reports of normalized use. And Scottish data indicates, for instance, an uptick in recent experimentation from relative liberalization. Harm reduction, though life-saving for users, fosters indefinite dependency, subverts the crisis point at which true transformational change becomes more likely, and confuses values-based education to deter initial entry. So my party advocates a switch back to prevention. Right, thirdly, deep failure by politicians to take a long-term multi-generational perspective and to invest sufficiently in infrastructure. And here I'm thinking particularly about housing in the UK. Obviously, there are social norms undermining marriage and relationship commitment. Family formation, though, is also badly disrupted through unaffordable home ownership. It's now 10 times average income for those who are earning to be able to afford a mortgage on a house. It was 4 times in my day. Almost finished now. Artificially suppressed wages through supply-side factors like cheap labor importation have created greater economic inequality, which makes more societal inequality. So just closing, last week I was talking to MCC students in Cluj-Napoca about the renegotiation of what community means for their generation. I was really hopeful. The search for belonging and community is a sign of the seeking after meaning and truth. And maybe there's a postmodern world coming into view. And I have faith that renewed community can and will be safe with a motivated young generation such as yourselves. So a summary statement to close. Society has to deserve an absence of drug users by deliberate recommitment to the relational webs so readily abandoned. Society that politically recognizes and encourages constructive and complementary collaboration with faith communities will succeed in that objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balogh. And I ask Mr. Niforatos to share his thoughts.
Very good. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with you. And I think what I would like to say is, I have the joy and privilege of working with Kevin, who you heard earlier. He's the founder and CEO of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM, and I'm the executive vice president. We work together on this issue. And I think that for me, the foundation of it all starts with the family. And the family, Aristotle once noted, is the most basic block of the society, of the polis. the most basic block. And if the family is weak, then the society is weak. This is what he observed in his politics. And I know many of you students out there are studying these classics. You're reading the ancient writers, looking for truth. And it's this truth that I think must guide us in the policy discussion today. A society that is, above all, seeking the truth is also going to be a society that is going to do right by its families, because we can't find truth and discover truth without wholesome families that are fully supported by the society and the government around them. And you can't find truth without having faith. And so I want to bring this home just for me personally, because I'm somebody I'm 35. And so I'm old enough to have an amygdala that is developed. I'm able to think longer into the future. But I'm still young enough to remember when I was in your shoes and when tomorrow looked like a very long time to me, let alone 5 years or 10 years. I am now going on 11 years of marriage, which is the single greatest achievement in my life. A marriage of this many years to a wonderful woman. It is something that was hard-earned, and I'm very thankful for it. I also have 2 wonderful little girls, 9 and 4 years old. And that is what guides me, my family, my wife. So it goes God, and then it goes my family, and then it goes my work and my mission. And my mission is to save America and the world's families from the scourge of drugs. And so how does this come home? Well, I grew up in a faith-based family where my dad was a preacher. And I grew up doing ministry all around the world, doing refugee aid in places like southern Sudan, spreading the gospel in other countries with my dad. That faith-based upbringing was central to my identity as a person. And through that upbringing, I was also homeschooled. So I spent most of my time with my family. I built a strong sense of identity within my family that gave me the foundation, the roots to make good, responsible decisions. As I grew older, I became an older brother. That taught me the responsibility to my brother, that he looked up to me. My dad frequently built that into my upbringing. Then, as I got even older, I realized my responsibility to the community around me. Going to college, I realized I wanted to do something. I wanted to put my skills into a profession that helped other people, the way that I grew up helping other people. So this was something that in the United States, we have a society that is hyper-liberalist, very individual. My parents made the choice to espouse those values in a government that sometimes encourages that, more or less, and sometimes doesn't. But that was how I was able to learn these values of responsibility to my community, making good decisions, holding on to my faith and my identity for myself. Okay? And also, key to all of that was how I discovered truth. I grew up in Colorado, the first state in the country, in America, to legalize marijuana for recreational use, to create a corporate industry around it. And coming from the background that I came from, with the values that I had, I was a young man when we legalized. I had just graduated college, and I was against it, but I didn't really think much about the policy. I didn't think about how it would impact me because I was a young man, I was single, I just thought it was thinking about my life, didn't like the policy, but didn't really think about it. Well, then I got married a few years later, and I started to think more about the world around me. Then I had kids, and I started to think about their future. And I started to think about my career and what those impacts would be. And that changed my perspective on the world around me. And specifically when it comes to drugs, it made me think about the policy was impacting me and my children and their future when marijuana was legalized. I started seeing that when my wife and I would take our first daughter, she was 10 months old, on a walk in her stroller in Denver, the secondhand marijuana smoke that would engulf her stroller near playgrounds and on walks. And realizing that our daughter at 10 months of age, while sleeping, is breathing in secondhand marijuana smoke and thinking, that's not normal. That shouldn't be okay. Starting to see thousands of pot shops selling new kinds of marijuana products, dabs, vapes, ice cream, sodas, gummies, thousands of them across my community in Denver and elsewhere, and thinking, when my daughter is old enough to read and to recognize and to see these things, what is she going to think? And am I okay with that? Then I started to have my family grow. I had another daughter, and I thought, you know what? We need to do something about this. I saw the families around me impacted. I heard my friends telling stories about their parents getting divorced because one of them was addicted to marijuana and stopped being a responsible husband in the relationship and started to do things that just could not be lived with. I saw the wreckage to families. I saw the deception that happens when people become addicted to marijuana, and the only thing they're thinking about is the pleasure for themselves, not their responsibility to their family members, to the people around them, to doing the right thing, to seeking truth, to their faith. I saw how it got in the way. And I thought I have to do something. So I joined up with Kevin, very long story short, to tell the story, the other side of marijuana legalization, to show the harms of the substance. Now, Kevin talked a lot about the harms, and he talked a lot about the industry and how it got involved with these products. I want to point to a very specific dynamic that concerns me about this that I want to make sure is present in the discussion here today. The family is important, I talked about. Faith, finding truth, and having strong families, very key. We have created a perverse incentive in our country, in the United States, where people are deriving a profit, making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to addict and even kill their fellow man with their products. That is an incentive alignment our government has sanctioned by allowing 30-some states to legalize marijuana for recreational use, sale, and advertising. What do I mean by that? We have companies where they make money when people use their products more. What is their product? It's an addictive, psychoactive drug now that is giving people mental illness, that 30% of people are now developing an addiction to, that with the potency at the levels it is at, it is actually causing people to commit suicide, to commit acts of violence, to commit acts of domestic violence against their loved ones, to do all kinds of harmful things. And the reward for that is profits to the companies that are selling these products. There is a perverse incentive alignment when you legalize drugs and you introduce them into the marketplace. We can say, and we can have discussions about types of regulations, and we'll write laws for that. But at the end of the day, the government cannot reach its hands into every single person's homes. The government cannot put police officers at every single playground and park in this country. The government will never have that level of resources. My point being, we will have to deal with the negative impacts of these policies, whether we like it or not. And we can write the laws however we want to write them, but at the end of the day, when you legalize drugs, you are creating a financial incentive to addict and destroy the family. Family is broken, company profits go through the roof. That is something we have to talk about when it comes to drug policy, the fact that it cannot be introduced into society. So I am very interested and looking forward to this conversation around how we can protect the family, restore the family, and make sure truth is the North Star, and identifying how drugs actually gets in the way of that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Niforatos, for your introduction, and I ask Mr. Šúst for his speech.
Thank you for inviting me to this interesting discussion. My predecessor, Luke, seemed to me already said some of the points I want to stress as well, because I thought that in my entry I will focus on family as well, and then maybe I can say some thoughts about faith and community in the discussion. So I want to stress the family as a natural institution that is older than state, and it means that the role of the state is to help the family and not to try to take over its role, as is often the case. And now I want to say a few thoughts about why family is important. First, because it is a place where we learn to love unconditionally. Parents love their children because they are their children, not because of their performance or merits, as is the case in other institutions such as school companies, sport clubs, political parties, etc. Everywhere else, people are valued, or at least should be, on the basis of what they can do. A company will not pay you if you have no results, or at least it shouldn't. But parents will give you all their possessions just because you are their children, which may not always be the best idea, but that's how parents are. Secondly, the fact that parents love their children unconditionally implies that family is the best context for upbringing and education. This is because values and character are not primarily learned academically, but by imitation. And it is true that we want to imitate and follow those we love. That is why parents have priority over all other educational institutions and professionals when it comes to upbringing and education. In short, a young child is not likely to become, let's say, an honest person just because someone else tell him the lecture about why to be honest. But young child is more likely to become honest if his parents who love him and whom he loves behave honestly, even if they never read Nicomachean Ethics and are not able to lecture about moral theory of virtues. And this also applies to other character traits and virtues, to moral education in general. Children imitate those whom they love, and this is the way how moral education works. I try to outline that family is important because only parents love their children unconditionally, and that this love is the best context for moral upbringing. Now, as my third point, I will try to make a point about why education is important. So what is the ultimate goal of moral upbringing and education? As moral philosopher Robert Spemann says, education is primarily a process in which a child is carefully and purposefully brought from the preoccupation with his or her own subjective emotional world into reality. To say it shortly, it is for the children to get proper foundation that would enable them later in their lives to learn how to judge things according to their value. For example, young children like children's songs and rhymes, and that's fine. But it wouldn't be fine if they still liked these same songs as teenagers or adults. The goal of parents is to teach or educators, not just parents, but educators, is to teach children to enjoy truly valuable content. In music, it means to really know from inside that music of Liszt or Beethoven is more valuable than, say, pop music of Katy Perry or Coldplay, although Coldplay isn't all that bad, unlike Katy Perry. And as we know, truly valuable things require more effort, education, habit. So trust of the child to his parent is necessary at the beginning of education and upbringing. Therefore, unconditional love of parents to their children helps to build trust of their children to them, and by doing so, it helps them to open up their children to reality so that they to learn how to distinguish good from bad, better from good, beautiful from ugly, true from false, high from lower, etc. So we see now why the family is indispensable. When it is in crisis, society is in crisis, and the young generations are in crisis. And the current family is in fact in crisis. When we experience a demographic crisis, we have no doubt that family is in crisis. Where there are no children, there is no hope and there is no joy. And where there is lack of real joy coming from what is beautiful, true, and good, and when there is a lack of friendships in which people could share real joy of what is beautiful, true, and good, people tend to seek substitutes, pleasant pleasures, exciting experiences, or even drugs that help them to overcome boredom, routine, betrayal, unfulfillment, and pain. Therefore, if we are looking for the deeper cause of epidemic or drugs, psychic disorder among young people, we will have to take into account also the crisis of the family, and we will have to search for ways of how to help the family to get out of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Šúst. Let's continue from here, with the topic of happiness. Some people say that drugs bring pleasure and they even bring happiness. Do you think that's the case? You don't have to answer on the level of the Nicomachean Ethics. You can also tell stories, if you like, personal witnesses. So the question is, what is the true meaning of happiness?
Yeah, actually, I would like to pause because I'd like
All right, very good. Well, I'm half Greek, so I feel like for my ancestors, I have to get at this question. I'll bring Aristotle and Socrates in again. I obviously the ancients talked about, for at least my lineage of ancients, talked about telos. When you're achieving life's purpose, and that purpose is for the good. And I think the ancients were thinking about what could the good be, and there's a lot of, I think, morality that they discuss when it comes to that. But I think when you have the faith context, it's you're walking through what God has designed you to do. You're living life that God has designed for you, enjoy, and achieving what He's put you on earth to achieve. And I think that brings a lot of true happiness. I think that there was a lot of tension, particularly among the ancients, like with Epicurus, for example, who thought that the good is simply that which is pleasurable, that which feels good. And his followers got up to all kinds of awful things. And I think that, interestingly enough, we're still seeing that tension today in the discussion, and I think drugs are the perfect case study for that. Because what we see is there is a group of people who have, quite frankly, their brains have been hijacked by these drugs. Drugs cloud the mind, they cloud your judgment, they show you, you're psychoactive, you're seeing things that you don't see normally. Your mind is altered, and in many ways is permanently impacted. And when that is taking place, your brain, especially if you're addicted, is seeking the immediate pleasure, seeking the thing that feels good immediately. And that actually has merged quite well in my country's culture in the United States. We are very much about quick satisfaction, instant, receipt of goods and purchases. We want things faster and better, and we want that feeling right away. We want a pill to solve our problems, even though it has never worked in history. We continue to push the next latest and greatest pill and medicine and solution. And drugs offer that illusion to people. They offer the illusion of happiness. A lot of people, it's interesting, in surveys that are done, they think that they're happy even if things that are profoundly and objectively awful happen to them on a regular basis. And that is because humanity is a very, we have such strength and fortitude. We can outlast even very difficult circumstances. And so we build a homeostasis. We become very accustomed to the way that our life is, even if it's deeply unhappy and deeply wrong and awful and hurting us. We develop a level of comfort with that. And the same thing happens, I think, with drugs, where people, they may be destroying themselves and destroying everything around them. They are so deceived by their addiction and by their drug use, they don't know. Their brain is telling them more and more and more of this drug. The pleasure is there. That's what's making you happy. And meanwhile, everything comes down around them. And so I think that, when you talk about what is happiness, I believe that happiness is walking in truth, whether truth with God, truth with yourself and who you are in full sincerity. And that's where I think that there's value to liberalism. And I don't think we throw out the baby with the bathwater, because people individually need to make that decision for themselves. They have to be walking in sincere faith and in sincere choice. Otherwise, I think that they're at risk to A, not be happy, and B, fall into drug use and other things. So I'll stop there. I could go longer, but I think that drug use offers the Epicurean ideal of the good and of the happy life. And that's wrong. We've seen that play out throughout history.
Let me run a little experiment, but before that, I just want to say that your opening descriptions of the family and family formation were absolutely beautiful, both of you. Thank you very much. The experiment is this. Hands up if you take drugs. My experiment is working. As in either recreational drugs or hard drugs like heroin and so on. I have. Okay. Of those who didn't put their hand up, which is almost everyone, who knows someone, let's say of their contemporaries, who takes drugs at the moment? Okay, of those, they're all in the front row. Oh, some in the back. My question to you is, maybe it has to be a yes/no answer, so because I want hands up. In general, those you know, or you if you do you consider yourselves to be happier as a result of those drugs? Hands up if yes, if you consider those others, let's say, to be happier. I'm seeing one hand. Okay, one hand. It's a small number compared to those who put their hands up just now. I mean, I'm not intending to make this a statistically significant exercise, but I suppose it's a general point that because I can't reflect the sort of let's say the answer that's just been given, but a more general thing, which is to reinforce that I think empirically the taking of drugs, sweeping statement, does not lead to greater happiness. However defined, it doesn't lead to greater happiness. One thing that is pretty certain is that it leads to a greater innate self-centeredness and selfishness, which I think is reinforcing what you have to say. I want to tell you a tiny story, a very personal story. I and my wife adopted 2 children. Both of them, the first was born antenatal heroin addict. He was born a heroin addict, I should say correctly, and the other one was born a cocaine addict. Now, they are doing well. They are 24 and 20 now. Before we received them, other people had to do the hard work of weaning them off. So instead of milk, well, it was alongside milk, they were having the first was having to have methadone, the second had to have whatever the equivalent is for cocaine withdrawal. What a start to life! The very environment in the womb in which you should be having the greatest safety was where those 2 children were being bombarded with all sorts of things, doubtless smoking, doubtless alcohol as well. So I don't blame the 2 separate mothers for that. We never met them. I was in indirect touch with one of them. But I reflect on just how much each mother's agency was taken away, the absolutely deep selfishness. They must have known in their hearts that what they were doing was damaging. But I will say, I will just flip it in their cases. They made the heroic decision, each of them, very separately, to carry their children to full term, even though they knew that those children would be taken away at birth. So, in a sense, those children saw the light of day despite the horrific things that happened to them. The older one does definitely have physiological challenges that have affected him. The other one has had some let's say mental developmental issues, but he's now doing a computer science degree at a top London university, so we're proud to bits. But it's just an illustration of a really, really close to home illustration of that really deep selfishness that an addiction to drugs induces in you, and it takes a heroic act to be able to pull yourself away from it and to make decisions which for the betterment of others and not just for yourself. So those are my observations in response to this question about happiness.
I would say that the sign of happiness is the ability to feel joy in compare to feel just pleasure. Now, happiness is never the aim. I mean, like you cannot decide to be happy and be happy. The happiness is the more side effect of living according to your nature, according to human nature. And to live according to human nature means, I would say, respect of 2 things about the reality of man. First thing is that we are rational creatures who cannot help but searching for truth. And we are also metaphysical persons. It means that we cannot search for truth also without taking account also the absolute, the question about God. And the second fact is that we are social beings. So it means that we need to learn moral practices to live in communities properly. We cannot be happy just alone. We need community to be happy, because we need friendship in order to, because we need friendship, because when we when we share of what is true, what is good, what is beautiful, it's much more joyful than when we search for these good things just by alone. So be happy means basically the ability to make friendships, the ability to love, the ability to live according to human nature.
Okay, so happiness doesn't really work. Let's try from another side, freedom. Some people say that we exercise our freedom, our personal autonomy, when we decide to take drugs occasionally or on a regular basis. In your view, what is the true meaning of freedom and autonomy?
So I think I've half answered that question with my comments about selfishness earlier. So I think true freedom, in a certain way, there are much more learned ways of describing it, is the ability to put aside one's selfishness without destroying oneself as well. There has to be a due recognition of self. Otherwise, you end up not having the capacity to exercise your free will anymore. Well, I think that I will give a general response here. It's already been mentioned so many times in the course of the day that true freedom has to go far beyond atomized, individualistic pursuits, despite the fact that society pushes that for all its might. I will make a comment from a politician's perspective that I think that the approach typically of politicians to their voters is also an atomized, a sort of atomization and wanting to grab their freely given vote with only a patina of some sort of collective identity put over the top of them, not a true linkage to other people. So I would say, just as another comment, freedom is the ability to appreciate freedom. Fundamental to freedom is the ability to appreciate those around you for being who they are, not for what they do. Just as in the family, that discipline is exercised, the unconditional love, the very fact of a child is enough for a parent to love them. I think what I would want to say about freedom is freedom in a social context is to embrace others just for who they are. And I think that's an underappreciated but vital element of the exercise of individual freedom in a social environment and how much it forms the glue that holds a social grouping, a community, and a society together.
I would add, I think, just thinking about it from the perspective of a young person, I think I remember in my early 20s, feeling frustrated that certain policies were the way they were. I felt like I was penalized because I had to be kind of equally responsible with the broader American public who, they had various issues that I didn't have, chief among them, we have a big debate in America about health insurance, which I'm sure looks a lot different here, but in America it's privatized and there's a lot of high cost risk sharing across those who are insured with commercial health insurance and also in government welfare programs as well. We all pay into it. And so, I think young people in America feel like, I'm healthy, I'm well, I'm fit, I'm living, the good life, so to speak. I can basically, climb mountains with the strength of youth that I have. And I think that it's easy to feel like I should have the freedom to do things that maybe are working out for me. If you're 19 years old, 21 years old, and you're, smoking cigarettes, you can still, run around stadiums. Your lungs aren't going to have these impacts yet. You can still make risky choices. You can engage in risky behaviors, and odds are pretty good. You're probably going to be okay for the most part. But it takes, this level of awareness that he's talking about and a greater appreciation of your, and I think this is where we go back to what happiness is about and what, the way that we're raised and the values that we have, to understand that is not true freedom. And I'm coming at this from the American context. Written into our Declaration of Independence is this idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So coming back to the first question, the pursuit of happiness is being defined and redefined in our country all the time. And for many people, happiness is what we talked about in the negative, which is this idea that it's whatever feels good and whatever I like doing. And you can see how that crosses over to freedom. I should be free to whatever feels good, to do whatever feels good and whatever I like doing, regardless of the societal impacts. Because I remember being a 20-something and not really thinking much about the societal impacts of, the world around me. And if I decided not to participate in certain things or do certain things, I just wanted to be free to kind of live my life with my own sphere. I wasn't thinking about the sphere around me. And it's interesting now looking back on those days as a parent, as a husband, with 2 children. I got married and I had to give up a lot of autonomy. I had to share that with my wife. We had to work out communication and reporting to each other about where we're going. It's not that it's what it felt like at the time, but we figured it out because relationships are give and take. And then we had our first kid and then our second kid, and the sacrifices I made in having children. I couldn't go out and hang out with my friends on a Friday night. For me, a Saturday night is watching a movie with my daughters or playing a board game. Like, they're both girls, so I have to play jewelry games and things like that. I grew up in a house of all boys, so I had to get used to that. But I think in American society, and you all can tell me afterwards about yours, but in American culture, there's almost this kind of, it's frowned upon. It's like, oh, you've given up so much to be married and have kids, you're losing out on all the fun. Because our hyper-liberalized, commercialized society says, commodities, you should be going for experiences, going on airplane flights to hotels. Oh, those hotels are really designed only for 4 people max, so it's not even incentivizing large families to travel. Oh, it's really expensive for a family to get on the airplane. All of the system around me is telling me it's better to be an individual. It's better to really not be married. It's better to be on your own because then you can enjoy all these services more economically. You can enjoy these experiences more economically. And so that feels like true freedom through the prism of what our culture has constructed. And I think for many, if any of you are married, and some of you I think are, and you're young, you probably are having those thoughts. Like, would it be better for me if I was out on my own? It would be better if I didn't have. But what's been so interesting to me, just my personal reflection, my life is so much happier. My life feels so much more free. I feel so much more free to be a much better person than I've ever been because of my marriage, because I'm a father, because of my children, and because of the way that has now led me to live a life that is truly abundant in every sense of the term. Because I'm doing good, I'm living for truth, and I have a family that is not an easy thing. But it's something I work at every day and invest in. What would I be investing my time in if I was on my own? Be investing my time in things that don't last, things that have no eternal dividend that they pay off. And so that to me is freedom. Freedom is not, I think, what this world has put together and constructed for us that we can purchase and has price tags and fees we can pay per month to secure it. I think freedom is much bigger and more honorable and more delightful than that.
I would say, obviously, freedom is a very valuable thing. Yesterday, we commemorated in my country, Slovakia, the day when we got free from communistic regime in November of 1989. And 50,000 people were on the Bratislava Square and other squares as well. But why is it so valuable for people? Why we value freedom so much? I would say it is because we can choose the good freely from inside, and not just doing good by instincts or because of necessity, but from understanding. And that's why to use freedom in a good way, it's necessary education, it's necessary to have a good training. It's necessary to have a good company of people, of friends who help us to learn. Very important things we can do when we have freedom. So yes, I think that in the current culture there is a mixed conception of what freedom means. I mean, if freedom means just doing what we want, then I don't see much reason that freedom has so big dignity, or it's part of human dignity. Because to do what I want, it's a childish way of behavior. The properly human way of behavior, it's doing what is good, what is beautiful, what is true. And this is what we need to learn.
I might just add a little bit more to this discussion. So I think, I was thinking about your moving and powerful story, and just thank you for that and for sharing that. And I think, where freedom, where the rubber meets the road with freedom and policy is, weighing the pros and cons of freedom. And obviously we're talking about drug policy. So we know that the trade-off for allowing somebody to use drugs whenever they like is that there will be pregnant mothers who are caught in the scourge of addiction and lose the agency to stop using, when a mother's greatest urge is to protect her children. I mean, drugs fundamentally get in the way of the human survival mechanism. They fundamentally hijack your brain and cause you to be destructive, even more so, I guess, than in the human condition. And so that's a trade-off we have to think about. Interestingly, in my state of Colorado, they did a study of all of the marijuana shops, and even the medical marijuana shops that are voted for as medicine, which we don't do as a country, but we made an exception for this drug. And it's not medicine, it's just things that people are smoking and using. And 80% of those stores recommend marijuana to pregnant mothers, saying that it helps them with nausea, even knowing full well how damaging and destructive that is to children in the womb. But come back to the perverse incentive alignment that I was talking about earlier. These industries, their only incentive is to sell commodities and return profits to their shareholders. That is how it works. And so they're not thinking about those downstream consequences. We as a society have to think about those. So it no longer becomes a freedom debate about what somebody's going to do for themselves. We've gone far beyond that now. It's about what are we going to allow a massive multinational corporation to do? And are we going to allow them to make these products as accessible as cigarettes, as accessible as so many other commodities that are out there? And so that's where the freedom and the policy discussion, that is where the rubber meets the road. And I think there's this conception out there in the more libertarian flavors of conservatism that, people are rational actors, they can make decisions for themselves, whatever they do in their own home, it's their own business. If we lived in a vacuum and people stayed in their own home and never went out and they only used it in a controlled setting, maybe they would have an argument there. But the fact of the matter is mothers get pregnant, women get pregnant, they, and some of them can use drugs, and then we can have these issues. That impacts somebody other than the person. The fact of the matter is somebody uses drugs, gets high, goes behind a wheel, drives, and kills somebody. Fact is somebody is impaired by marijuana and goes to work and at the factory and hurts their coworker. That's happening all across the country in the United States. This is not something we can isolate in a vacuum. It's something that impacts everybody else in fundamentally detrimental ways. So the freedom discussion has to have the consideration of these trade-offs. And we as a society have decided that's something we want normalized.
Thank you. Let's go to the area of moral education and moral values. It seems that moral education is crucial in helping to develop a human being. What would be the special moral values to educate that we need for the prevention of drug abuse? Is it temperance? Is it self-control? And in what ways can we help these moral values to grow?
I'll leave it to others to talk about theological virtues, which undoubtedly we'll touch on. I'm going to give a personal answer from my wife, who is a Montessori school teacher. Some of you may have heard of the Montessori scheme, especially for early years, but later as well. Maria Montessori was an Italian polymath. She started off as a medic, the very first Italian female medic from the late 19th century. But she had an interest in education, and what she noticed from her Catholic background, her Catholic pedagogical background, was she observed young children, and she observed them, most people thinking that they were playing. What she identified, and a very deep insight, was that they were working. They were wanting to work. And part of that was wanting to emulate, to simulate what their parents were doing and others around them were doing. And so her Montessori scheme, many people think that Montessori is very much child-based learning and let the child move at its own pace and so on. But that's completely wrong. What it's about, and this isn't an advert for Montessori, it's an observation really about how children develop and develop moral virtues, is that what her entire Montessori scheme was about harnessing that desire to work, that desire to make a contribution, that innate desire to do good, and that she shaped various schemes about learning to read and number blocks and so on, pouring jugs, folding up handkerchiefs and so on. Very, very mundane things, washing up. Which sound to some people as if that's preparing them for the drudge of household or something. But no, very far from it. The moral education was learning how to work and to work properly and to work diligently. So, if I was education minister or something, I would really want to see educational policies which recognize that, not necessarily in a specific Montessori sense, but adapting that innate desire right from early ages, 2, 3, 4, 5 upwards, to contribute constructively to the world around them. How they contribute constructively, of course, in later childhood leads to the sorts of things that were mentioned in the question about temperance and self-control and so on. The younger child doesn't have that capacity yet, although can develop some of it. So I'm going to pause there and then hand over maybe for some aspects from others.
Certainly. I think, I think there's two parts to my answer to this question. I think the first part is in keeping in line with what I was talking about with truth and how truth needs to be the North Star for society. No better way to have truth than to deploy the evidence and the scientific facts about drugs in education. I mean, that's the topic of this panel. We're talking about the drug crisis, right? And people need to be educated about the actual hard facts about drugs, particularly marijuana, which is widely misunderstood. And what we've seen in the United States is the government in the 1980s and early 90s had a national taxpayer-funded anti-drug education campaign. And it was very famous. It was very effective in its early days. It went a little bit out of date. Then its effectiveness went down, and government totally cut all funding to it, completely shut down the anti-drug education program. So there is no organized federal anti-drug education program in America right now. And in that vacuum of leadership on the truth about drugs, we have seen celebrities and companies step in, both of whom are completely financially, the incentive I was talking about, they're in the business. They're selling these drugs. They're the ones coming up with the latest concoctions that are ruining and addicting our youth at very young ages. But these are the folks that are educating everybody about the harms of drugs. Who's on Instagram? Not the federal government, not the Department of Health and Human Services of the United States government, folks. The folks on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter are these corporate tobacco-backed companies pushing these products. Who are the influencers that are on there? It's not your local health professional and doctor or medical MP from the UK. The people that are the influencers on these social media platforms are Snoop Dogg and Lil Wayne and Mike Tyson and all these other celebrities who all are invested and are paid spokespeople for these companies. And that is who's teaching our kids and the next generation about drugs. So we have a massive vacuum of leadership in America on this subject, and something our organization is fighting to bring some sort of national federal program back where there is some sort of leadership at the federal level. But I don't think that is the full answer. The second part of my question is, I think that it all starts at home, and I think it starts with our parents. And there's a wide array of things, and you're going to be in the business, hopefully, of deciding these policies in your country, We need to have policies in our country, and I know Hungary's doing a lot of this, that incentivizes parents to be home with their children. We need to have opportunities for parents to school their children. My wife and I have chosen to do a hybrid homeschooling program with a classical Christian schooling approach. We are spending more time with our children in the education setting than the institutions are. Our children are not growing up in an institution. They're growing up with their parents who are instilling and inculcating their values, their faith, their community, and yes, an excellent education with the assistance of an excellent program. I think parents need to be incentivized, A, to be with their children more, and B, to participate more in their education, and specifically their drug education. Because I will tell you, and I'll leave you with this, the drug talk for me was with my dad. I vividly remember it. I was 12 years old. On our newspaper was a little table about all the different drugs and their basic harmful impacts on you. And my dad told me, he sat me down, he goes, son, I use this drug, I use this drug, I use this drug. This is what it did for me. Son, don't do it. Don't ever use these substances. It's going to hurt you. This is what it did to me. Look at these harms. That was enough for me. I didn't use substances at all. Not alcohol, not tobacco, no drugs. I stayed away. And it's because of that interaction with my father. And I think we have to have strong fathers in these families that are leading in that way, and strong mothers as well. I think that is key, and that's where it starts.
I would say, of course, all cardinal virtues are important. Theological virtues as well, but maybe if I choose one virtue which I see lacking in people today, it's courage. Courage to search for reality, not to run away from reality. I would say many people feel that to search for what they desire, in reality, it's too difficult, it's too impossible for them to achieve, and that's why they are satisfied with the digital world, reality, or even drugs. So I would say the courage to search for reality. One example from my life. During the weekend, we were with some other families together because we wanted our children know each other and play each other. And one of my friend said to my wife, "Oh, that's so inspiring for me that you are homeschooling your children, but for me it's too difficult to achieve it. I am not able to do it." And later my wife reflected this short conversation, and because she was thinking about not being able to answer what her friend said, and then my wife said, "Well, of course, it's difficult, but everything what is worthy of pursuit, it's difficult. I'm not at home teaching children because I am so strong and able to do difficult things, but I'm doing it because it's beautiful, because I'm enjoying that I'm wife and I can spend more good time with my children to educate them to live good lives." So I would say this might be the answer, to have a courage to embrace reality and to find in reality what is real good, beautiful, and true.
Can I just add something to reinforce, Luke, what you said? That triggered in my mind actually the talk that your father had with you back in the day. I was talking to someone who may be in the audience here earlier about the sort of temptation to say yes when drugs come your way. And in my answer a few hours ago, I gave a very equivocal answer. In my upbringing, in my socialization at university and beyond, I didn't go to nightclubs all that often. I did very occasionally offer drugs, but never in a situation where I felt strongly invited, let alone compelled. But I said to the gentleman I was talking to, I don't know whether I would have had the moral strength to say no were I in quite a coercive situation. But now, from you, Luke, I now remember, I do remember quite often actually, I said to someone last night who offered a cigarette to me, and I said, no, sorry, I gave up at the age of 9. I gave up smoking at the age of 9, and that's absolutely true. I took up smoking at the age of, 9 and 1 month, and I gave up at the age of 9 and 1.5 months. I had 2 weeks of smoking. I fell in with a bad lot. I set fire to a cornfield. I was a bit of a pyromaniac. It was a bit of a rebellious period. But my mother, in fact, found a half-empty cigarette packet under my bed. And my father, in the gentlest possible way, just sat me down. They were both lifelong smokers, so they were very keen not to pass it on to the next generation. Don't do as I do, as it were, do as I say. But I remember, I think I was, in some ways, broadly insulated from the temptations beyond cigarettes. Not the temptations of alcohol, that's another story, but the temptations of cigarettes and drugs ever afterwards. And I think I want to say thank you in absentia to my father for that, to the father who's still alive and in England, because that in some ways just set me softly, gently, yet really firmly on a safe track. So, yeah, public praise for my father.
That's good. I want to add on to that. Really powerful, and it sounds like we had shared experiences. I think the legacy that a father leaves is key. And I think for those of you, again, you're in your 20s, you're thinking about your lives, your career, perhaps you're married, thinking about family. The thing that you'll really start to think about as you get into your 30s and have children and everything is your legacy. And particularly, I've been thinking a lot about the legacy that my dad left to me. And his biggest legacy he left to me was a firm foundation in faith. And that is something I will forever be grateful to him for, because it's my eternity, my life, my vision, my values. But the second thing is, I do think that his honesty with me and participation in my education, in the homeschooling format that we were in, because we traveled full-time as a family, his commitment to my education, his commitment to participating in that and sharing with me the mistakes that he made. Like you're talking about your parents both being smokers, not wanting to pass that down. Him having experimented with drugs and didn't want to pass that down. And the evidence backs that up, by the way. We know that from the research that basically, 95+% of people, if they don't use drugs by the age of 21, they're unlikely to ever use drugs. And that's where the policy and the facts come together and the rubber meets the road. And that is that if we can work through family, work through government domestic policy, and also national security policy to keep drugs out, and work to prevent use before it starts, to leave this legacy to future generations that is a drug-free legacy. What a legacy you leave to your children. What a legacy you leave to the next generation of your country, your future workers, politicians, doctors, etc. That's a legacy you want to leave as a country as well as for yourself.
One of my great spiritual leaders in life is Viktor Frankl. He, as a psychotherapist, found that finding or giving meaning to human life in general, or to my life in personal, has a healing effect. And I would like to ask you, how can we help young people to give or find meaning in their lives and feel responsibility towards their own life and towards the whole community?
The questions are getting bigger and bigger, aren't they? So I will just echo what I said earlier when I talked about the Montessori thing and about bringing out the innate instincts, call them what you will, of a child. by way of their constructive development. So I think that provides meaning to young lives in a very practical sense. I would say, with my personal hat on, as a father of 2 sons, we have tried to lead our life in our Catholic Christian confession. At the very least, we've tried to instill in them the sort of ethical, practical principles that they can carry about with them. Today, neither of them is actively practicing in a Christian context. My older son definitely believes, and he acts in a way that suggests that. Both of them, I want to say, have developed strong ethical character. I sincerely believe, I hope I'm never proved wrong, that they're not getting involved in wrongdoing, criminal wrongdoing. There's no evidence about active use of drugs or taking or distracting and diverting others of their peers into bad things. And so this is all about, I think, I want to say, a sort of practical foundation of meaning and an orientation. What is your North Star? I would love to say, in a similar vein to the two of you, about, in a more direct way, I suppose, the inculcation of faith, because I truly believe everything that you are saying. I'm here in a slightly different persona as a public figure, as a figure, as a politician of a secular political party. So I in a certain way, I'm constrained from saying everyone should be seeking after, let's say, a Christian faith. I feel that I caught freshly on fire with faith through some unfortunate, difficult circumstances. And here's another bit of my story: the suicide of my mother when I was 19. And it was others of faith who helped me through that. They carried me on the stretcher, in Mark's gospel style. So I really firmly believe that, and I think that really is. Everyone's soul, everyone's heart will be restless until they really do find God. But I think in this secular world, I have to say that there are ways of finding common ground with those who aren't active believers. And the sense of sacralization is a term that's often used. The sacralization of organizations. The European Union is trying to sacralize itself through narrative, through making itself useful, through trying to connect with people. It's having very limited success, I would say. But I would say then it's a legitimate thing to talk in a secular sense about the sacralization of relationship through community, that it is a worthwhile thing to invest of your heart and of your spirit into relationships, obviously maybe with a significant other at some point, and into marriage, but more broadly, giving of yourself, because in a certain abstract sense, I feel that an investment, a genuine investment in a community and the giving of yourself into it is a sacred act, and one that helps give meaning to yourself, because it takes it out of yourself, takes you out of yourself, and gives yourself to others in a meaningful way. So I look at things on very, very many different levels, obviously, but I would say, just to repeat my last point, and I think I observe this, I'm older in years, I've been around the block a bit. When I come across people, it's not hard to tell whether they are practiced in giving themselves to other people. It's actually quite easy to tell if people haven't exercised that sacred opportunity, that sacred duty, I would say, of giving yourself to others through community. And that is truly a differentiator. I've seen it actually in this past week. I've seen many, many MCC students, both here in Budapest, in Győr, in Kolozsvár. I'm looking forward to Békés Csaba on Thursday, hopefully seeing some MCC students there. In general, I think, some of you are not even yet MCC students, I suspect, but I would say I recognize that tug into community, and that has to be good for you. it has to be good for the community that you're serving, and it has to be good for society as a whole. And that is a great part of meaning in life, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's a fantastic point. And I think just, thinking about the issue of drugs more particularly as kind of a narrow case study of what you're talking about. I think, and I remember, again, I remember being in my early 20s and being in college and being in the dorm room my freshman year and, realizing, okay, I'm gonna have to live my life for myself. I'm gonna have to think about my future. I'm gonna have to think about how I wanna regularly schedule my day. Do I wanna go to the gym? Where do I bank my time? Where is my time going to be spent? It took a while to figure that out and find meaning. Also, I had dreams and aspirations like probably many of you do. And I didn't know what of those is going to come true, what path to take, what class to take. I had a lot of open questions. I was very driven, like probably many of you are also, but I didn't know where I was going to end up, and I didn't know where I was going to go. And there were a lot of times where I felt like I didn't have meaning. My life maybe, or at least was suffering a crisis of meaning. And so I can only imagine that some of you also deal with that. Many of you are probably high performers and maybe don't want to admit it, but those are things that you're thinking about. And just to emphasize this point, I think service is a great way to help outlast those times, because I think those will come for everyone. Serving your fellow man, serving the least of these is truly a life-giving activity that helps you find meaning, helps you find the things that are important. And also it helps you pass the time, because sometimes you have to be, and this is a lesson I had to learn all through my 20s, you have to be content with where you are, but that doesn't mean you have to be satisfied. That's what an old pastor of mine told me. And that was truly the case for me. I had very big goals, very big ambitions, and I was very much not satisfied with where I was. But the contentment came for me when I focused outside of myself and in serving others. And how does that apply to drugs? Well, there are so many people in our society who are dealing with addiction, who are living lives of addiction, and those people deserve our compassion. Those people deserve our attention, that we should bring a healing touch to those people. Many of these folks are homeless. Many of these folks are in poverty. Many of these folks are without social connection because of what their addiction has done. This is not something that we should stigmatize to the point of saying, you are an outcast of society. No, these people need our love, our attention, our care. And that is an opportunity, I will tell you, for each and every one of you looking for meaning. Because I will tell you, being somebody who's not in recovery, and Tom, you're going to hear amazing stuff from him, but getting to work with people like Tom, getting to work with people who are in recovery has grounded and humbled me, because it's shown me what humanity and what I myself am capable of. We all like to think of ourselves as, I wouldn't get into that, or I wouldn't go that far. But drugs can turn any of us into somebody that we would never anticipate. And I think it's important for all of us to have a chance to serve and to work and to walk alongside with people in recovery or people in active addiction or people who are using, because they need our support, our help, our attention, our service. And when you work with those people, it will absolutely change your perspective on life. And it will change your perspective not only on your own life, it will change your perspective on how policies should be passed and how people's lives are impacted by the policy decisions that we make. Very, very important, and I couldn't encourage you enough, and I think it will definitely assist with that challenge.
I agree. What was being said, to add one more thought, to help young people to find meaning in life, is probably, in other words, to show them how to love, and it means first that there are some other things outside of interiority of young people that are worthy of love, and that the aim of education is being able to even die for some things outside of me which are worthy of love. So if young people have nothing to die for because everything seems empty and similar to others, then it's the sign of not able. It's a sign of the crisis of love. Not able to love, not able to sacrifice myself for some other case. Maybe one more thought. Of course, religious faith, I mean Christian faith, can help much with teaching of love, because as I said, moral education, it's about imitation of behavior of your parents. So I mean, to love properly is try to imitate the love of God, whether the love of the persons in Trinity or the love of God towards humanity, which in Christian story is so perfect that and so merciful that God even sent His Son to die on the cross for humanity, for saving humanity, for eternal life, and in this religious context, to strive for living in reality, to strive for moral education, it's much more easier than trying to have moral education in a secular context, when you have to think that the life is void of meaning, and it's just me who needs somehow to create the meaning of life by experiment. I mean, the second option is well, it doesn't work, and the first option, the religious context, really is helping to learn to live a life well, morally well.
Thank you. We have 11 more minutes, and there are some excellent questions arriving on Slido. Thank you for that. One question says, what's your opinion about the saying, pleasure over matter? I myself, I'm not a native English speaker. I don't know this saying, and I'm not sure I understand it, but you are more clever than me. So pleasure over matter.
You familiar with that one?
I'm not. It sounds a bit Freudian to me. Pleasure over matter. I don't know who asked the question, but whether they want to clarify or say something more of it, even shout out. Matter in English, of course, can have two senses, can't it? It can be something physical like a table, or it can be an issue, something that matters.
This may raise beyond our ability to philosophize.
So, I mean, I'll just make a general comment, which is yet another angle on the same thing that we've been saying. Pleasure must never be put at the pinnacle of one's life. Pleasure is an excellent human, God-given, I would say, quality. It has to be put into context. If anywhere near unconstrained through self-discipline or through societal restrictions, it will go wrong. It will render the individual a slave to that pleasure. That's a comment on the first of those words. I won't attempt to forge the relationship for comment that maybe the questioner was looking for, and I apologize.
Maybe we could slightly change the question a bit. Pleasure and the good. And then the answer would be that it's never worth to search for pleasure instead of the good, because what you are really looking for, it's not the pleasure, but joy coming from the good. That's what I would answer.
Another question says, do you have methods to make addicted people accept our help if needed? How to gain trust among them, for example?
Great question.
No, please, I'll talk after.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of proven methods that are working really well to help people who are in addiction to know that they need help. And that runs a full spectrum. And a lot of that's in actually the blueprint that Kevin had in his slides, if any of you scanned it, but it's at blueprint.drugpolicy.org. The whole report is there, but we go into a lot of the things that are working. One example is this idea of carrots and sticks. So in the United States, we have drug courts, where somebody is caught with a drug offense. They are given an option. They can go to treatment or they can go to jail. And that is the carrot and the stick. And it's quite effective at, maneuvering people who are addicted and maybe don't think they need help to get them into help. Then there are other things. I think societal discouragement is still key. Having a culture that discourages drugs and really makes it not comfortable for somebody to be in addiction, I think is key. So what are ways we can make it uncomfortable for people to be in addiction? Well, obviously making drugs illegal is a start. Making it illegal to use drugs in public so it's not comfortable for them to use out and about. Having other consequences to their use makes it uncomfortable for them to use. It makes it more risky, and that drives somebody towards it as well. So I think there are ways to both with a light hand and then with a little bit firmer of a hand to move people that are in addiction who maybe don't see that they need help towards help. And there's a lot of very proven experiments going on in different parts of the world and certainly in the United States as well.
Thank you. One very well-established method I would just comment on is I think often known as the 12 steps. It's originated within an organization called AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And we haven't really touched on alcohol in this session, have we? Unless I haven't drunk any. But one of the features of the 12 steps, it originated in an explicitly Christian context. And again, there's been an abstraction of it, which I think works in a more secular context. But what it fundamentally, and I don't know the detail of it, fundamentally tracks is an individual addict, drug addict, alcohol addict's capacity to come to a genuine realization that he or she is helpless and needs to make him or herself open to the genuine help that is on offer. Because there is I think it's reasonably empirically sound that just before that, when they don't really have the realization that they are otherwise helpless and do need to put themselves into the hands of, let's say, professional carers, that the chances of success if they embark on a rehab journey, in a sense, too early, without that completely giving of themselves over to that journey out of it, the risks of relapse are multiplied. So I happen to know very well a drugs professional of 17 years in this space, and he said the judgment of when that individual is ready enough, at the risk that something might go tragically wrong before the individual is ready enough. It's a real institutional calculation that he has to make. But once that individual does get there, the chances multiply of a successful, if slow, rehabilitation journey. So that particular aspect of the 12 steps scheme really does strike me, partly because it really does combine the strength of community, the strength, in this case, of professional supportive community, and the individual's capacity to opt into it. Which I think is really our human story, isn't it? It's our relationship with those around us, whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, and how we respond to that.
The last question, and please be short. It says, how could we develop a nicer and more accepting society to help drug addicts? And I also put it or match it with my question: how is a society different where drug is liberalized from the one when it's not? You have 3 minutes.
Goodness, that's a really big policy question. Fortunately, there isn't much time. I think one of the challenges of Western society is that it has a tendency for easy kindness. And I think a liberalized drugs policy, very broadly speaking, is a symptom of that tendency for compassion over, let's say, reality. That's a very contentious statement to make. So I think the question might be trying to lead towards something akin to a much more liberal approach. But a liberal approach is not the same thing at all as a compassionate approach. And a compassionate approach can be, you sometimes have to be quite stern, sometimes borderline, as it were, cruelty. I don't want to use that word, to be kind. There's a phrase, cruel to be kind. So I would, that's really my answer. The answer isn't an easy compassion. It's the hard road, which is better for the individual and is better for society.
Yeah, I think it's a very complex answer to the question of how to have a society that has compassion for those using drugs while also discouraging it. And I think a lot of societies have either fallen on the extreme side of we're going to embrace it and normalize it and liberalize it, as you say, or we're going to lock everybody up and we're going to, throw away the key and stigmatize and everything. And I think there's obviously, I think the right answer is somewhere in the middle of those two things. I think that we need to spend a lot more time as a society stigmatizing the drugs themselves, the use of these drugs, and not the people. And I think that helps us get there as far as compassion while still having a firm voice of truth about these substances and their impact on society. So I think that's key. And I think to answer your question of kind of the difference in between a liberalization of drug society and not is I think there's many differences. But I think really what I talked about at the beginning, and I'll just bring this home in my closing few seconds here, is that a liberalized drugs society is one where people are incentivized with a lot of money to hurt their fellow man. Under the guise of liberalism, each person for themselves, and however you want to make money, go for it. And I think we can't accept that.
I liked what Stefan Balogh said. I agree with that. I would add that no policy will solve the problem, but what might solve the problem is that young people will be able to search for meaning in their lives, and in order they will be able to do it, we need to revitalize, renew families, and maybe, hopefully, once Christian culture in our Western civilization.
We talked about armoring our youth, faith education, and community responsibility. We are very grateful to Mr. Balogh, Mr. Niforatos, and Mr. Šúst that you shared your expertise and wisdom with us. Thanks for your attention.